All right, welcome back to Relative Conscious. My name is Thomas Brown.
Irvin Bryant.
Shout out to the DJ from Mac and I Beat.
At DW Made That on social media.
And follow us on social media.
At Kinda Woke on Instagram and Twitter. Relatively Conscious everywhere else. Go ahead and like, follow, subscribe, share, and comment. All those. Do all of them one at a time. Go ahead. Like it. Bam. Hit the subscribe button. Hop on social media. Follow. And then in the comment section, finally. Oh, and share it with your friend. Go ahead and text it over. Group chat, whatever. The question is, did the coronavirus, COVID-19, did it come from a lab? Off top. Was it from the bats? Wet market, like we used to say, like we heard at first? Was it a bioweapon engineered to destroy? Or was it oops? And then global pandemic.
Yeah, so we're gonna talk about the lab theory, as it's called, shorthand. This is what's interesting about the lab theory or coronavirus is that when we first heard about coronavirus popping off, Vox News they did a video explaining it. I think it's one of the most popular videos. Yeah, and they explained it coming from a web market, right? And the way it was always explained to me was that there's web markets in Wuhan, China, other places in China where these animals are in unsavory conditions, and they're stacked on top of each other. And basically, that's how coronavirus came into being, right? There was always a second line of questioning, a line of thought that it could have came out of the lab in Wuhan. There's a medical lab in Wuhan that does that researches viruses. The research they do is controversial because it is, in some form or fashion, creating new viruses to study how the COVID virus works, right? So COVID is a strand of viruses, 19 being the one for 2019. But you could manipulate the virus to see how it works and how we could fight it in the future. It's almost like, I don't know, the best way I can explain it, use a pop culture reference, is like what's it called? Skynet from Terminator. Basically, that you create is it Skynet from Terminator in a computer?
Yeah, you're right, but I mean that's old. But go ahead and do it. I got one for you, but
it is old, yeah. But yeah, it's just like, how do you get to the point where you have killer robots? Basically, you create a machine that can learn, and it keeps going down that road. At some point, the machine gets smarter than humans, and you can't stop it anymore. Basically, it doesn't allow you to turn off the on. So it doesn't allow you to turn off the off button, or it'll kill you, based type of thing. So, this is why this type of research is frowned upon by people who are Luddites. That's the word for it.
Luddites. Yes.
Yeah, Luddites. Right. Basically, people who are.
I don't know if that's entirely applicable. I mean, Luddites hate technology or fear new technology. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, it's basically they don't like playing God because you can mess around and create the COVID-19 virus. And we aren't God, so you just stop playing with it. But scientists will say this is good research to do because it can help us figure out how viruses manipulate and mutate, and we can be more ready to fight it. What was the new example you're going to give though? Because Terminator is old.
There's a lot of them, honestly. I really kind of got stuck when I was thinking about it. I happened upon one, but like so many, that's like a really common, and I think for a good reason, science fiction trope where, a scientist creates a thing for a purpose, and then that thing is supposed to think, and then it thinks in the most clinical way and takes it to the extreme. And it's like, should we be playing God? Should we take things to the extreme? Lessons are learned. Case in point, Ultron, my man. He's trying to create the program to help him fight evil, stop bad things all over. Goes awry, and he's like, "Oh, you know what? The best way to stop evil is take over the planets, and then I can control it." And then, there's so many, so many are running through my head. It's impossible to list them all. Science fiction things. So, yes, maybe we should have taken a little more caution, but we're jumping the gun. Okay,
Yeah.
sure they were doing research, but how you know it came from there? Because research is done not exactly in that way, but with illnesses
Yes.
all over the globe. Things are quarantined. There are checks and balances, safety standards, etc. So before we even go to how the folly of man,
Gotcha.
how do we even know we were connecting these two?
It's a lot to get into, and so what I'm going to do is just kind of show you guys the articles, and then you can watch them and go to the videos. There's a BBC video that explains how we got to the lab theory being taken seriously. Here we go. We have a timeline that basically explains how we got here. This is the Wall Street, the Washington Post has a timeline about how the lab theory suddenly became credible. It's written by Glenn Kessler, right? So it came out March 25th, May 25th, my bad. And this basically goes through the timeline how we got here. Tom Cotton being one of the first people to really point out the notion of it coming from a lab, and he pressed for China to answer questions. Now, China was never trying to give anybody access like that, so they can go into their lab and figure out what their standards are, and if it came from a lab. But the Republicans were the first ones who got on this boat, right? So Tom Cotton wrote an op-ed about it, and this is, they go through the timeline real quick. Early speculation here. Tom Cotton says in a committee hearing that a coronavirus probably came from a lab, and he's rebuked for saying that. Here, an article is written by Washington Post responding to him saying that, and he offers four scenarios. The first one being natural, that it came naturally. The second being that it was good science but bad safety, so they were doing good work in the lab, but they did not have good safety standards, and that caused the leak. The third being bad science, bad safety. They were creating bioweapons, and then because they had bad safety standards, it got out. Number four being deliberate release. The Washington Post responded to him by writing an article that Tom Cotton keeps repeating a coronavirus fringe theory that scientists have disputed, right? So they basically slammed him in an article calling him a conspiracy theorist. And this is February 17th, 2020. So it's before we go on lockdown, anything like that. But they consider the theory to be a fringe theory. And as you go deeper into the timeline to get to today, here, May 5th, the New York Times scientist basically writes an article saying that it's something we should look into, right? And then President Joe Biden tells the intelligence community to look into it and come back with him a report about whether or not it came from a lab, and they had 90 days to do it. And so you have a couple different places that are writing articles about this. The other one being the New York Times. They have an article about the lab leak theory, and it's written by David Leonhardt, right? And he basically goes through all the steps. Basically, what are the basics? Like, how did we get here? Why have we decided to talk about it now? And what changed, right? And in the what changed part, he basically says that people kind of started looking at it more seriously. They were like, well, we haven't found the natural wet market solution, basically, right? So if you're asking how the coronavirus came, they said it came from web markets, but they haven't really found any evidence for that, basically. And so if we're back to the drawing board, if natural hasn't been accredited, so maybe the lab leak is the other way to look at it. And he goes to why people were dismissed for saying this. And the main reason why they're dismissed for saying this, we go through all this. They were Republicans, and they were adding racist stuff into it, right? So when Tom Cotton starts talking about the lab leak theory, he starts talking about China, using it to make their stance in the world better. That China was doing it as a way to hurt the United States. It's part of Donald Trump's. If he would, on one hand, Donald Trump was not going to take coronavirus seriously. But on the other hand, if he did take it seriously, he was going to be xenophobic about how he took it seriously, right? So either I'm going to act like the coronavirus is not happening, but if it is happening, it's an attack from a foreign government using a bioweapon, basically.
Gotta stay on brand.
Yeah, you gotta stay on brand, right? And so even Matt Iglesias and Nate Silver at first really said it, like, really dismissed the idea of this. But Matt Iglesias just wrote an article on Substack, his website, getting into the lab leak theory and why it's something we should actually think about. And so My first question is, what's your initial response to that timeline? What is your first thought processes when I give you that timeline of how we got to where we are now? The lab big theory being taken seriously.
Like everything, I really don't want to sound like a one trick pony, one note performer, musician. Don't want to be a broken record. Okay. But it's a sign of the times because, and I'm about to say a bad word that I hate, we so polarized. Yeah, I know, hot take. No one's ever said that before. Original thought from me, your boy.
Yeah.
So what I mean is that, and you've presented to me some new information there that I didn't know, that and that I kind of inferred is that when Republicans, in blowing this whistle, so to speak, in alerting the public and certain intellectual dark web, I take issue with that term, but it's what we call them, those who are intellectuals, academics, who publish and talk about work that is
one quick thing real quick. It wasn't just Republicans, it was also Bill Maher, who is a anti-vaxxer, if I'm correct, right? Is Bill Maher anti-vaxxer?
He doesn't I don't know. I don't really follow him that closely, but I know he doesn't really like him, and he makes jokes a lot, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But the people he was talking to were intellectual dark web people.
Yeah.
Who were on his show when
he was one of the first ones who were on the mainstream, I guess, of like on the left. Who were Democrats talking.
Yes. Yeah. So, like I said, when you got Bill Maher, a jokester, an old man who says old man things.
Yes.
When I say old man things, I mean like erroneous things that some people just say because that's the way it used to be or something like that. You got IDW, Bill Maher, and Republicans, and they put their signature spin on it, right? So the IDW guys often lace things with this weird geopolitical view where, the U.S. is uber righteous and we're the saviors, and China is some, dark villain, and they're always, bucking against it. They do that often with Islam and, IDW. So they always got some kind of weird ethnic take on it. The Republicans, classic nationalist Trump deal. When you put that on it, it's hard to receive. And then especially when we're polarized, especially when you polarize in the news outlets that are the foremost, that produce, in my opinion, the best work. And I'm talking about in number. Wall Street Journal is excellent as well, but they're a minority of conservatives. All the liberal outlets who do great work hate that kind of thing. Once you sprinkle that little bit of racism, that little bit of spin on it, I hate it. And so now I've got to condemn it, especially when grandmas are getting stomped out, especially when the president's saying the wild stuff that he's saying, especially when coronavirus is knocking at our door in February of 2020, and no one's in government, at least, is taking it seriously. So given the conditions, I see why everybody messed up. You see what I'm saying? Sign of the times, we all kind of dropped the ball. Of course, the federal government is highest to blame. But when it comes to sourcing out the origin of coronavirus, we collectively messed it up because we are a little lost in our own worlds.
Yeah, and so my thing that when I looked at the timeline that I found the most interesting to me was that the first people who got on this bandwagon before the Republicans and Bill Maher and IDW were Chinese defectors, basically. So people who used to live in China, but they call it, what's the word for it? Expatriates. There we go.
Yeah, say expats. Yeah.
Yeah, expats or defectors. And they write scientific journals for other institutions. And they, there's a theory they hold that the SARS outbreak, which got really bad in Hong Kong, was deliberately China deliberately let it get bad in Hong Kong to hurt the population in Hong Kong because they were resisting being taken over by the Chinese government. Though I guess China would not like you saying taken over because it was theirs in the first place, and Britain.
It does technically belong to them, but they'd like to be politically, in some ways, autonomous when it comes to running their economy, civil liberties and stuff. Because the UK no longer controls Hong Kong. It is a property of the People's Republic of China. But
Yes.
that reason we had all those protests and whatnot is the laws, the freedoms.
Yeah.
And so that's a bold take to say that they poison their own people.
Yeah. So that's the take given by defectors.
Yeah.
And the other arguments that it was not to harm Hong Kong, but also South Korea and Japan, which had a really hard time with SARS outbreak and became a serious issue. And so they were the first ones peddling this theory that this was not. The word peddling this theory makes it sound. The first ones who gave spotlight to the ideal that it could have been a lab leak, basically. That they were on the bandwagon, basically that China, it became an outbreak, and China did not do enough to stop it from exiting their borders, because if they were going to hurt, everybody else is going to hurt too, basically. And it's funny because it's mainly Republicans who listen to the defectors the most, because when they talk about China, any discussion of China really gets very weird very quickly, because you have the problem of becoming somewhat xenophobic when people who are Republicans are talking about the threat of the Chinese government. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why we have to do this. It's kind of like talking about Israel Palestine, talking about a bunch of different issues that involve people who aren't Americans, or even within America, people who aren't white. Certain people, I don't know why, they can't control that proclivity to make it weird and be like, it's them sneaky Chinese. It's like, whoa, chill.
Yeah.
Maybe, a foreign government does something weird. Of course, all the time. Someone's always doing something crazy. But I don't know why they can't refrain from saying it's about, the Chinese.
Yeah.
Right.
It's about the Han people, particularly. Yeah.
Why?
And so my second question was, what does it say about political media? Because part of my problem here is that the New York Times, Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal talked about this a little bit. Their newsroom, which is way more left-leaning than their op-ed page, really kind of pushed back against covering this, because the newsroom really did not want to be seen as being xenophobic. It's why there was a constant problem during the 2020 election of the newsroom not reporting on the Hunter Biden situation, but the op-ed portion talking about it. And so, or the riots, that's a whole nother thing too. So I feel as if political media really got blinded by their hate or distaste for Donald Trump, and they weren't able to see this for what it really was. And that to me is an issue, because that means you can't see the truth when it's in front of you. Not the truth. You can't see plausible situations when they're in front of you. You become blinded by your own political leanings, and that's the criticism that the right gives the mainstream media all the time. They say they are corrupt, they are biased, and this kind of feels like a win for the right in their criticism of mainstream media or political media in that sense.
Yeah. But okay, my thing is, where is the objectivity? Like, where does that exist? Because the right likes to do that, and the New York Times doesn't often, at least in my experience, or Washington Post or whoever else, on the particularly left-leaning publications. I don't experience them disclosing like, oh, I believe X, Y, and Z, and that's why I'm going to say that. But I am going to just flat out say it, right? So if I say trans rights or human rights, Pride Month, if I just come out and say that, I don't have to preface that with "I'm from the left," so
yeah,
like you get it. That's duh. it's implied, right? If I say Second Amendment over everything, you know where I stand. Conservatives prefer, and they do this in their media, which at least I can respect their being principled, and it ought to be disclosed. So on Fox, when you get an opinion, they're like, these are conservative opinions. This is what it is. I'm conservative. And these other guys are being duplicitous and trying to act like they're just giving you truths when they're giving you opinion. Lots of shade being thrown. Lots of stones coming from glass houses, I would say, because that objectivity just doesn't exist. And of course, the onus when it comes to reading an op-ed page is on the reader to parse out what that is. And even in the newsroom, because I know that's where the absence of coverage was in the newsroom. Yes. Even there, I mean, it's not where it's supposed to be. Like we would like for things to be objective, but that's just not reality, right? And especially in a world where, I repeat, because this was horrendous in 2020 and 2021, and it really blew up in 2021. But like Asian grandmas getting attacked, like this is crazy. Yeah. Like it's not a regular time. And the president, before it really even started happening, in numerous occasions, the president was begging, not literally, but in his speech, which is what the last president did all the time, just begging somebody to do something. It's these Asians, it's these Chinese, they coming over, they bring in disease like it's 1876. He threw it all the way back into to the older days, to the old West, and was like, oh yeah, there's foreign people, you can't trust them. And so in a world where that occurs, again, they're getting it wrong. I think that we should not applaud this mistake, and I don't like that they overlooked this, very plausible idea and failed to report on it. But given the circumstances, in the fact that that an informed reader ought to be an informed reader, right? Yes. It's not the publication's responsibility to give you the world, right? So you got to figure out whatever else is beyond the pages of the New York Times. I say forgive. It is a wrongdoing is a wrongdoing. You got to recognize it for what it is, and don't forget. Forgive and don't forget. So I mean, I can go forward without holding it against you. But for my caution going forward, I have to remember that New York Times can have a blind spot. I mean, if anything, it's not. I think this is not a win for the right, but a lesson for all, if not a lesson for the left. In that, hey, even these truth dies in darkness guys will sometimes leave some darkness laying around.
Yeah. And so I'm about to get to my second question, or third question in a second. But what I feel like it is, though, I feel that the issue I have with the newsrooms and their blind spot on this is something that also happened with the 2020 racial reckoning, the riots, right? Where the New York Times, many of their editors, their longstanding editors, quit or were forced out, basically, by the newsroom, which is way younger than most of these editors are, way more left-leaning than most of these editors are, and they felt the New York Times coverage of the 2020 racial reckoning was, I think I'm going to put it correctly, I think one person said, who was part of the newsroom, that it was reminiscent of the LA Times covering of the 1992 riots, right? If I want to remember correctly, the front page of LA Times the day after the riot started was a burning picture of the LA burning, basically, and riots erupt across the city, right? And so it doesn't talk about the fact that 4 officers get let off for beating Rodney King on tape in front of all of us. But the first thing they talk about is the fact that property was burned, right? And so on the left, their discussion many times is that buildings are replaceable, people are not. If we're going to talk about what happened, we got to talk about George Floyd first, and the people's issues with the police first, riots secondary. But if you're old school news people, you're like, no. If it bleeds, it leads. If it's a fire, it leads. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the fires. We can talk about George Floyd later in the pages, but the first thing is the fact that the Minneapolis is on fire. And that thinking was just not with the newsroom and these new journalists. And there I say, and so there, many people applaud that as a new wave of journalism, right? A new journalism that's more thinking about how their news affects those who are marginalized. But I see the other side of that new way of thinking, where if something is hard for me to parse out, or if I feel as if it is in any way harmful for those who are of lower standing in culture, I'm not going to deal with it, right? So the increase in crime is another thing. There's a blind spot for New York Times and the Washington Post. Like, that's a serious issue. it's New York centric, but it's something they're not talking about a whole lot because I don't want to get into an issue that is where I feel like I can do more harm than good, right? And so the question is, does this reflect back poorly on the state / media, like Iraq's WMDs? Because part of the thinking process is the media ignored something that was true, the same way the media ignored the fact that Iraq did not have WMDs.
See, I'm already on broken record. But forgive and forget. It's not, and I guess it's a ethical, philosophical, difference between our perspectives, where, or at least between your questions and my perspective. Yeah. Where you have to ask the question: what are you trying to get from any publication? Right? Like, and certain things they just will happen. Like, there will be blind spots where certain people don't think it is important, don't believe it's worth covering. They believe something else is more important. They believe the impact of reporting on this will be bad, so I don't want to do it. The impact of reporting on this in this way will be good, so I have to do it that way.
Right.
And that's, when it comes to freedom of press, that's part of it. It's not just freedom to tell an uncomfortable truth, which is, I would say, the most important. The freedom to say, Watergate, I got the tapes.
Yeah.
The freedom to say, the president in any way is wrong, state's wrong, whatever.
He messed up for that intern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could be true. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
But it's freedom to say that, but it's also freedom to not. Like, it's my newspaper. I don't do that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So you say it's a freedom not to do that. So
and you of course have the freedom to, it's a consumer thing, right? So
right.
It's private business, support, don't support.
Yeah. So if that's the case, if they have the freedom not to report on things, then should they stop calling themselves to be objective? Because the Wall Street Journal.
Who says that though? That's the thing. I'm like, I don't expect objectivity. I expect truthfulness. And I think we need to really, objectivity is cool. Objectivity is like très chic. Like that's like super, especially in a hyper polarized, like, news environment. Yeah. That makes you really cool. That makes you really that makes you stand out. But it's not a reality, and it never has been, unless it's even in a photograph. Like, quite literally, a photograph has a perspective. Like, you can't not do that because you're a human being. So, especially when you have all this money, you have all these factors of impact and intent and funding, advertisers, people in high places. I just don't expect that from anybody. So I listen to more than one person.
Yeah. And so, the New York Times does say we are objective. And that's something they say.
It's pretty stupid.
So you think that they should just go ahead and
why lie? It just doesn't make sense. Also, and then there is it's a wisecrack video explaining the beginning of origins of the idea of objectivity in news. And there's many essay about it. You can read about it. And I suggest you do. But the gist is that it's not a reality. That's just not real. And objectivity is a financial, economic, capitalist. I'm searching for the word, but it's a goal that you seek for money, because objectivity appeals to everybody. Because if the nature of things is subjectivity, and I'm looking for a certain perspective, I'm looking to build a certain perspective, fortify my perspective, whether that is good or bad, that's what I'm doing. The majority of news prior to a certain point in the 20th century never tried to be objective. It was just like, I saw this thing. This is how I saw it. We're both Christians. We're both Republicans. We're both Texans. So we have that in common. And here's I'm going to inform you from our joint perspective. I don't know any other way to put it. Like, everything black, like when it comes to black media, art or otherwise, we just be like, this is the black way of seeing it. And we don't have any question about that. Like, this is how Black people saw it. I'm Black, so I understand you, and I relate it to a way that you understand in considering the things that you value, right? And you can do that with any community. I just am just beyond me to expect anybody to try to have this omniscience around any particular subject or around the bevy of subjects that happen on the day to day, when we have a globalized world. Again, things are happening in front of Wall Street Journal, like, in front of their doorstep, and New York Times, that either publication, because of their political spin, will ignore. And I mean, I don't exactly love that. I'm not saying they're righteous for doing that, but I don't expect them to do otherwise.
Okay. This is old. You guys, do you remember the old what's musical Newsboys?
Newsies, yeah, something like that.
Yes.
And I know what it is, and I have never seen it.
Yes, I was forced to watch it in school, but it takes place early 19th century, New York. The early 20th century. Sorry, early 20th century.
Yeah, I was thinking.
Yeah. And basically they're peddling a bunch of different magazines and Newsboys, right? But something that is interesting is how many different magazines, I don't know how many different newspapers they're peddling. So extra read our ballot,
yeah, I was about to say that.
Right. In those days in New York City, it was a newspaper for each, every facet of people that lived in New York, right? So this is when people are still coming fresh off the boat. So there's an Italian newspaper written in Italian that probably does not makes no mention of the Godfather at that time, right? There's an Irish newspaper that's probably talking about the UK and about from the Irish point of view. There's going to be a Scottish newspaper that's a Black newspaper in Harlem, right? Everyone got their own newspaper in New York at this time, right? And that's why you can have newsboys, because I pick up one, newspaper, one section of the culture. I go to their corner and I give them their newspaper, right? But as we've had less newspapers because people don't spend as money on news anymore, and it's just a dying industry, you only get 3 or 4 major nationwide voices. And because people want objectivity, was done before, can at least be objective about how you're going to do it. But that's never what it was supposed to be, because from the beginning, it was always a bunch of newspapers from everybody's perspective, right? So just certain perspectives just died off more than likely than anything else. The last thing is, what do you think is going to be the impact of this, right? So what do you think is going to be the impact? I think something that the reason I want to talk about this, because a lot of people on Twitter, people, I don't know, right now they're looked at as trolls, but like when the report comes back from the intelligence community, and I believe it will come back and say is a chance above 0 that it came from a lab, they won't be trolls anymore. Kind of like the same people who said Donald Trump would win in 2015,
right?
They were trolls, right?
Until
Donald Trump won, and now, well, maybe I should listen to them, right? So we did a bunch of the media did a bunch of articles about these people. They went to a diner in Kansas. Let me talk to these people, right? What do you think of the impact of this if the media realize that they missed something this huge, and they consider these people to be trolls, but they come out to be true?
Okay, I think it's 2 things: likely and there's unlikely. Let me go unlikely, optimistically.
Yeah.
They say, hey, there's a thing in news called a retraction. It's too late for that because it's been, this is a saga.
Yeah.
But and I haven't read that Washington Post article that you put up that you've already read. But tell me if I'm wrong. When they outline it, do they in any way acknowledge that their first claim from a year ago has in one way or another been proven wrong?
Sort of.
Okay.
It's like it's not the James Harden step back. It's not a full step back. It's like a scoot backwards. It's like a
jab. Yeah.
We were kind of wrong, but I mean, it's Tom Cotton, so
it probably was right.
It probably was right. Yeah. And then the New York Times article kind of does the same thing. They're like, my colleagues weren't probably wrong, but it was Tom Cotton peddling this. It was Ted Cruz. It was Donald Trump.
Honestly, that's the best I can expect. So I'm gonna stick with that. I'm not even gonna go good, bad. I'm just gonna say, look, egg on my face, my B. You had to understand where I was at the time, but I did make a mistake. And then I mean, the trolls and those who want to be further entrenched and want to be further polarized can take that wherever they want to take it. But like WMDs, like AIDS, like crime in the cities in the 90s, and so many things that the news has gotten wrong or at least portrayed in some weird slanted way. I mean, they did it. Like, you know, the news is going to do that every single time through generations. They just get it wrong because they're doing it live and direct as opposed to, you know, studying like a academic would. So the mistakes made, like I said, forgive and forget. People won't, but I don't think it's going to make a profound impact because people already didn't trust you. Those who didn't trust the New York Times already. They didn't trust the Washington Post already. So it is what it is.
Yeah. So my impact is going to be way more a darker picture than yours, but because I don't think that to the trolls, the trolls are the trolls, right? They are who they are.
Yeah.
But those who are vaccine hesitant, like Charlamagne the God.
Oh, geez.
I mean,
forgot about that part.
He is a troll, you know, in my eyes, because I mean, you don't talk about Elijah's sister getting raped in front of his face, and you're not. You got to be a troll to do something that are ridiculous.
I mean, he questioned Obama to his face.
Yeah, which is ridiculous. Like, yeah. So,
and with a bad question, you can question the man, but with something stupid, with a troll, he trolled him. Yeah, live and direct. So Charlamagne's a troll, yes.
Yeah, you know, Obama's not a god, but if you're gonna waste that man's time with a bad question, I'd rather be he be hang gliding in Hawaii than dealing with you. Right. But what I think it is that I've seen this a lot where a lot of people are just not. They just don't want to deal with the political media anymore, or media altogether. They're just tired of it altogether. It's like, and I think it kind of ties into Osaka going home because the French media. Part of the
issue, never been kind to black people.
Yeah, they've been kind to black people. Part of the issue is that Osaka, you know, there are questions about her playing on her ability to play on clay. She was just done. She was tired of talking about it, right? And they continue to talk about it. And many people who are our age, you know, they're just like, well, yeah, good for Osaka. Go home. Don't deal with the media anymore. You know, I don't like the media in the first place, right?
And I was actually surprised that her contemporaries in the ATP were like, yeah, I kind of feel her. Yeah, like, of course they're still gonna go. They're like, Osaka's not there. I have a chance to win. Yeah, but like they were like, yeah, I feel what she's talking about.
Yeah, and I mean, and even Serena Williams,
yeah,
doesn't like them with the media. Or this for people who watch football. Marshawn Lynch, we all remember him saying, "I'm just here so I don't get fined." But like,
classic.
We applaud him for that. But the old heads in the media, old heads who like old sports media, was like, "Oh, he's being disrespectful. These people are covering this. The reason why he can get paid, my money gets paid is because the media, right?" But Marshall Lynch and Day was like, "I'm from Oakland. I'm taking care of my chicken." That means this is terminology for I'm taking care of my money, right? So I'm just here so I don't get fined. That's all I'm going to be here for. And so I think many people our generation just do not see the media in the same light, right? We don't see it as necessary. Marshall Lynch, Osaka. We don't see it as beneficial to telling our point of view. This is basketball players refusing to give interviews to people other than those who they kind of handpick, which kind of goes all the way back to Michael Jordan. I mean, Ahmad Rashad is his homeboy and his best friend. That's the guy who got most of Jordan's interviews. Everybody else did not get an interview with Jordan. It was only his homeboys. Now Jordan's a GOAT and he can do that. But maybe a lot more people are doing the same thing, right? There were certain journalists in Houston who could not get an interview with James Harden. And so I think our generation thinks very much differently about the media. I think this is another push in that direction, right? Because the New York Times or what Times and the Wall Street Journal trying to figure out how to talk about 2020 riots, the fight that was in the newsroom about that. Mm-hmm. To be honest with you, most people just thought the New York Times was going to cover it badly anyway. They never cared that they were having this fight in the newsroom. I could tell you that they were. I can go to Black Twitter and be like, hey, the New York Times really thought and cared about their coverage of the riots. I don't care. I didn't read it because I didn't trust it from the beginning, And I think this is where kind of saying where we're going down the same rabbit hole. So those who are moderates, or people who are somewhat intellectual and read, they're going to see this as not just egg on the face of the New York Times, but another reason why I'm not willing to buy the newspaper. Another reason why the newspaper industry is dying. Because why would I ever pay for something that I'm never going to believe is going to have my point of view, or it's going to be objective in how they view things. And so I see it as way as a maybe not darker, maybe something that was going to happen anyway, but I see it as
I know we're supposed to be done, but I'm like, where are you going to go then? People, I mean,
Reddit.
Just to some degree, you have to be informed.
Yes.
This has to happen. None of y'all are journalists, bro. And those who want to do journalism of some sort, go to some organization, maybe independent news media, maybe some new guys, internet blog, whatever. That's cool too. I like that. I follow some guys. But you gotta go somewhere. And
well, they go to like Matt Iglesias and Substack and Nate Silver.
Matt Iglesias, and this.
Yeah.
Nate Silver's the closest because he's a numbers guy. He does stats.
Yeah.
And so, numbers don't lie, though having a perspective isn't necessarily lying, right?
Yes.
And, Nate has perspectives. So Matt Iglesias, Nate,
Ezra Klein. Yes.
New media doesn't change the way it works. It's frustrating. I get it, but I don't know where these people are going to go besides Substack, where they get, a slightly different perspective, which is great. Get a different perspective, but it can unplug from the news.
Yeah. Because
and exist in society.
Because Ezra Klein created Fox and then became a New York Times columnist. So or Jenna Costas, who's a Black woman who became popular during the Nazis taking over the internet portion of 2015, 2016. She now works for the New York Times. She's a podcaster for them. So many of these new media people who have their own, they are considered to be objective, or they had a different point of view. If I was the New York Times, I'd be like, at the end of the day, y'all all come back to me. Wherever you want to go, but at the end of the day, you're gonna come as Thanos said.
I was just about to say the New York Times Thanos.
Yeah. What did it bring you? Back to me. You came back to the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post. Y'all can all do what you want to do, but at the end of the day, when it's time for you to get fat and fluffy, you're gonna come back to me. So it made people not want to deal with media anymore. But what's gonna happen? The New York Times is gonna start buying the people who's considered to be the new voices. ABC.
Well, I mean, certain people stay where they're at. I mean, some new media people are really the person I listen to on the daily is Philip DeFranco.
Yeah.
New York Times does not want him. I don't think they do.
True. But again, they probably haven't offered enough money yet. There's an amount of money they can offer.
True. The man. And that's the thing. The new media people like Ezra Klein, and I'm sure they offered him. He's getting paid.
Yeah, paid.
Right? Yeah, because he built Vox and paid. So,
anyway, my name's Thomas Brown.
Irvin Bryant.
Peace.
Do it to him,